Coffee. How many
Hello,
people
Andy.
have told you that you have like the perfect cowboy name?
I haven't heard that actually.
No one's ever told you that?
No.
What? I mean, if I
No.
didn't know you personally, I would
Yeah.
think that's not a real name. It's not
It's
his
my
real name.
real name, and people have said that. That's not your real name, is it? And I said, yeah, it actually is. Coffee like the drink, spelled the same way.
Where the cowboy thing is that like? Did you guys have a ranch? You grew up on a ranch?
No, we had a family ranch.
Yeah.
I have like a comedic character that is kind of like my alter ego. That's probably very similar to who I am because I'm not. I was raised in Dallas. Like I'm not.
Concrete Cowboy.
Yeah. Cubicle Cowboy is a character. It's called Skyler T. Jennings. There's a lot of these in Dallas, as you know, oil and gas and real estate guys that are kind of weekend cowboys.
Yep.
They go to the ranch, they go to a lease and play cowboy on the weekends, but they're in a concrete jungle most of the time. So no, I did grow up like going to our family ranch every weekend, and we had horses and but I don't know, I just love cowboy hats and being a Texan. And
I do too, and I'm like so even more into it now. I just finally jumped on the Yellowstone bandwagon and finished all 5.5. I don't even know what they call it. Like I think it was like part 1, part 2.
Oh yeah,
season 5 episodes, and I'm like, I'm gonna dig back into it. Like my great granddad, they were all cowboys, all went on the cow trails. I mean, all of it.
There's something about the Texan cowboy spirit that we're kind of. I don't know. I'm not a cowboy, but I enjoy the spirit of the American cowboy and what that stands for.
Yeah.
And even in LA, I was wearing my cowboy hat, and I live in South Africa. I wore it. And it's kind of my deal.
It resonates, like I think all over the world, regardless, like that spirit, the American spirit. So you're not actually a cowboy, but you do plenty of other things. So producer.
Mm-hmm.
Director, now new founder and partner in a new media company called Real Media. Yes, you got a lot of Congratulations with just all the success. You've been 20 years in the entertainment industry.
I did. I went to what they call Bethlehem on the Brazos and Baylor University. And I was
I've never heard it called that before.
I went there and they had a great film program, but I knew since I was a little kid, I was making movies on my ranch when I was 7 years old. And just always knew I wanted to be in the film industry. I was a child actor and did all that and was on some TV shows. And
wait, what? Okay. Let me guess. Walker, Texas Ranger?
No,
Did you get a spot on Walker?
Well, there was a sing-along show in like Saturday mornings in Dallas that
was
like
one?
I forget what it was called. It was like 50s, like Splish Splash. Like we'd sing all these 50 songs.
Yeah, because we have the studios. Like who didn't want to be on Barney? Who didn't like grow up thinking?
And then I was on a show called Putting on the Hits, which was like the American Idol of lip syncing shows. It was a Dick Clark production. And I made it because I was 7 years old, and I did Lionel Richie Dancing on the Ceiling. And I think because I was, 7 and most of the contestants were older, I think I made it farther than most people would. But yeah, I don't know. I've always loved, I remember seeing Indiana Jones in a movie theater and that was the first time I just knew that this could take you places, story, could transport you into another place, and just how impactful that is, the medium of in storytelling is, so I knew from, sports became more important in high school, but I always, in the back of my head, I knew I wanted to do film and media one day. And I moved out to LA I was there for 6 to 7 years and worked at Warner Brothers and NBC Universal in television and did some acting stuff. I experienced some dark side of the Hollywood for sure. But and then moved back to Texas eventually in like 2008 and started a production company, Coffee Productions, and did commercials mainly, but did a couple movies. But I've been in the advertising world, and, just to segue, that's kind of when we got into 2020, I felt very convicted that I've been a part of this, propagandist world. I mean, that's what I was doing is,
but did you feel like that was what you were a part of while you were in it, or did it take something big to help you get out of it?
Well, I think that's interesting. it was a means to an end because there's money in advertising, you know, and I wanted to do long format story, like telling and, you know, film and TV stuff, but you got to pay the bills. So without, you can raise private equity to do the, you know, independent films. And I guess going back to television in the studio world, you know, at Warner Brothers, I was on the show called Everwood.
I remember that show.
Chris Pratt's first show.
I didn't realize you were on that show.
Well, I was you know, I was on the post-production side.
Yeah.
So, and you know, I was thrown in the belly of the beast from Waco. I'd never been to LA, and yeah, so we can get in that if we want to. But then I just saw, and then I was at NBC Universal on a show called Las Vegas, and I was actually Bill the Bellboy and got my SAG card. I became an actor on that show too. But
which did you like better, the production side, like in front of the camera or behind the camera?
I like behind the camera, but I enjoy the acting side too. But I like I'm more talented at, you know, seeing a vision and putting all the pieces together. That's, you know, yeah. And I'm not a type A person. I'm a creative, you know, visionary. And I'm good at, you know, building a team. But I mean, I like comedy. I studied at the Groundlings too, which is the sketch comedy improv school in LA. And I've always enjoyed that, but it's been more of like a side, you know, if there's opportunity there. Yeah. So, and I've always played the cowboy or the jock, you know, jackass, you know, washed up jock. But going back to TV, I saw how controlled television in general was, just the media, you know, the industrial media complex at Warner Brothers and NBC Universal. There were all these suits that got a say on the creative, you know, 40 different suits. And so that just shows you, like, and that's turned me off of the corporate media world, just because it's so controlled. And then getting in advertising, you know, I met my mentor in Texas, a guy named Rocky Powell, who's a big commercial director. And he had Walmart and Southwest Airlines for 20 years and Popeye's Chicken. And he kind of took me under his wing when I moved back to Texas. And, you know, but I enjoyed the process of it. And it was, you know, it's telling these little short stories, but it's also, you know, I feel like it's advertising is just making you feel like you need something that necessarily you don't, or that you're lacking something, or, you know, you'll be happier if you buy this product. I mean, I felt a little bit like I was whoring myself out, and, you know, and that's not why I got into this business, was to just try to propagandize people and convince them they need to buy a product. Yeah. So I think when around 2020, when the COVID thing came out, and it was fear, like the fear base, you know, in the media, which to me was very demonic and evil, where we saw families divided, friends, you know, that were so scared. And I mean, some of my alpha male buddies that I thought would not respond in the way they did, just bowed the knee to the government. What were they doing? They would go, like, you know, one of my friends, I'm not going to name a name, but he would go on his, you know, he had a big following on social media. He was, you know, there's a big liberal judge, Clay Jenkins. Yep. That was, you know, he was kind of became one of his apostles, and was, you know, yelling at everybody that you're going to kill my grandmother, to wear your mask. And meanwhile, you know, Fauci originally says masks don't work. And, you know, now he's telling you to wear 3, and you're seeing people masked in their car, jogging with masks. Yeah. You know,
my favorite was that the virus just stops, you know, magically at that 6-foot wall.
Yeah, exactly. That was my favorite. 6 feet safe, 6 feet safe. Which we now know was he just made that up. And then it's fine, you know, to take it off once you are seated at a restaurant. You know? I know. I mean, that's science, Amy. That's
I know. So we laugh now, but it was not funny.
No,
it was not
and
funny back then.
I mean, half my family is extremely liberal. I love them very much to death, but they were scared to death. My Keep Austin weirdo family, who I love, but you just saw the brainwashing, and just, you know, it was, I mean, but I blame the media. Just, it was constantly running a death toll, you know, on as a ticker tape underneath every.
Yeah, that was wild.
So it was, you know, I think at some point I was very convicted And, you know, I did hear the Lord tell me to speak up, and I was gonna, I mean, that because he's put me in media. I mean, it was for 6 months. I was just like, you know, the 6 feet safe, mask, you know, stay home, stay safe. All these are campaigns that don't just, I mean, these are well thought out campaigns. They didn't just pop up, you know, in 2 days.
Yeah.
So
what did that look like?
Well funded.
What did that look like for you? You said that you heard that you needed to start speaking up. So what did that mean? Start putting out reels or shorts on Instagram?
I started speaking up. I mean, I wanted to be, you know, it's also, you noticed that it was, people were reposting Hollywood stars and politicians, and it was just like, you know, as that they were the gospel. I mean, it was just like, and they were just echoing what the narrative was, that this is the most dangerous virus that has ever taken over the world. And anyway, so I started using my social media platform, and, you know, I would post, you know, well, here's Fauci saying masks don't work. And, you know, and as you know, there's a verse like, let God be truth and every man a liar. I mean, I guess James O'Keefe said something that was pretty powerful. He said, what's your price? Is it $1 million? Is it 10 million? I mean, at some point, you know, every man apart, if you don't have, you know, to me, if you don't have God within you, any man can be corruptible. You know, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts. Absolutely. And if you're paid enough to sling the, you know, I mean, that's what we did, is hire different people to push different campaigns, ad campaigns. And it's just, I mean, these are very calculated, and, you know, I mean, we were taught propaganda in advertising and in film school. I mean, this is just,
it's powerful.
It's powerful, you know, and
you touch on the emotions. And that's what I think a lot of that was the emotional, they hit on people's emotions. Fear obviously is a very motivating factor.
It is.
And okay, so you brought it, you've taken us up to 2020. And you know, it's a large part of why I wanted you to come on today. You and I both share a passion for exposing the truth and giving people a platform to share their stories that aren't going to be censored and suppressed. I can only imagine that while you started to speak up during 2020, experienced some form of censorship. But let's talk a little bit about what happened to you in 2020, because I want to wrap my head around, you found yourself in the center of a media storm surrounding January 6th. And I really want to understand what led you in particular to a place that you were even there at the Capitol to get caught up in this media storm. Take us back to that. What were you doing on a day-to-day basis, even before all of that?
Well, so, I mean, to start, I was unable to shoot for a year because of the COVID.
That's right, because everything was shut down in LA.
And that's my business, is like, we have to shoot commercials. And then when they started opening it up, you're having to pay $3,500 for a COVID cop, you know, on top of your budget. You know, it's like to go around and take temperature. And I mean, it was the most ridiculous thing.
Were you in the middle of a movie?
No, it was commercials. I actually was in the equity raise for a film that you're familiar with about my backstory. And it was interrupted by COVID. So we had raised like close to $3 million, and COVID completely interrupted it. And
we'll definitely circle back to that, because I want you to share that story too.
Yeah, we can definitely share that. But so I think, you know, again, the Lord, I mean, I believe if you have the Holy Spirit in you, you can have one of three voices. You have the voice inside of you, then you have unclean spirits can influence you, or you have the Holy Spirit. And I know I heard the voice of the Lord said, I'm going to take you through a dark storm. You're going to lose your family members are going to turn on you. You're going to lose your business, your reputation, and it's going to be very painful. And but I will redeem you and give you a platform to share my truth and expose the darkness in my timing. And I'll be with you, my son.
Where were you, like, mentally at that stage? Like, do you feel like you were in a really good place that you could hear a message like that and respond?
Yeah, I mean, I was at a place where I just wanted to be like, I felt, you know, I was tired of, I felt like I was like, Lord, I want to be used. My dad actually came back and was the guy that was raising equity for this film had wanted to take care of his business because of COVID. And my dad does prison ministry. and he had prison shut down during that time. He said, and he used to do real estate deals. And he was like, son, I want to come and help you raise the rest of this equity and help you finish the money raise so you can finish this film project. And literally that night I went back to my place in Dallas and Deep Ellum, and I laid back down, and I was pumped that my dad was, because I wanted a guy to help me with the equity raise.
And what time was this? Was this before the election?
Yeah, this was November? This was like August 2020. Okay. And this sets up all January 6th. So, I went back and laid on my bed, and I just heard the Lord. He's spoken to me 2 different times in my life, and where it was audible, it was very clear. And he said he wanted me to speak out against the media. And, God calls us to expose the darkness, not just to, I think that's where we've gotten to where we are, because a lot of good men have, I think, fear in general, fear of man.
Yep.
What I was seeing too is all the mama bears like you, Amy, were standing up for the children, and being the loudest. I'm like, where are all the males? And where are the Christian males that are supposed to be standing in the gap and being bold and being lions, during this time where there's a fear of building, we try to build something on this earth, but this isn't our final, if God, this isn't our final destination. This is just a journey. Right. So I think a lot of good men do not stand up because they're scared of losing everything. And I've lost everything, and there's a freedom in that. And there really is. And being canceled but so, the Lord said I was going to go through this dark storm, and my parents were going to be my biggest adversaries, but they would come along, which is, I'm very close to my parents. I'm 45, still single. They're like my best friends.
They were going to be your biggest adversaries?
Yes. And this all came very true very quickly.
Wow.
I started speaking out the next day, and just, my parents thought I was going to lose my business, and like, they didn't want me to speak out. And it was, I would say like 40% was trying to expose, here's the truth. And then and the other 60% was pointing people to God and use it as ways to minister to people. And like that, this is, we can be deceived, you know, and media can be used to deceive us.
Well, that doesn't seem very adversarial. So what were they having an issue with?
Well, they had an issue that I was using my platform that I used to advertise my business in this way. And that, it was, a lot of people were attacking me. I had former crew members. I mean, I had Gold's Gym, Cinemark. I had big clients like that, and would have, sometimes 100 crew members. And I was having like crew members, former ad clients, people just sending me private messages, just, calling me. I mean, it was demonic. It was the most evil messages, just because I was speaking my mind and what I believed to be truth. And it was from that moment on, it was pretty chaotic. But it was, I still felt, God prepared me for what it was going to be like. But then, of course, January 6th, we can fast forward there in a minute, but they used all this as I lost it, and that's what led me to become an insurrectionist, and which was completely untrue. But of course he believes COVID is, a conspiracy, and which I did believe. I believed all these things. And so it was, and I work in a very liberal industry. In advertising and in film industry in general is very liberal. Yeah. And I've kind of kept my mouth shut. I've always been a conservative from the moment I moved to LA. I've always had conservative values, but my own journey with God has, made me become more bold in my faith. And, I feel called to,
Did you ever hit a dark moment during that time that you questioned if you were making the right decision?
It was very, I knew, I think I definitely had days where, I had friends that dropped me, very quickly and thought I was extreme. And so there was definitely that, Amy. I was, but there was days I questioned it, and it was like, is this worth it all? Because I'm a recovering people pleaser. And I think and that's one thing that God needed a break of me, is I think I've liked having a good reputation, and that I was a Christian in the film industry. But I've always, I've always spoken out, but I'm not beating people over the head with the Bible or anything, but I think people have respected me in the industry. And I think that was the hardest. Like, and then, you know, people I love, like turning their back on, or just not wanting to distance themselves from me. And that's before even January 6th happened.
Yeah.
But you know, I did feel that this is the time I need to stand up. And it was I had my own business. It was my decision, you know, and I was feeling led by the Lord. And
how is this affecting your business at this point?
I mean, I think I knew that this was going to definitely end some relationships. I mean, because I mean, a lot of them were big corporations, you know, that I was, you know, affiliated with, and ad agencies that were very well known. And that was the time where, again, I'd never spoken out in Hollywood. People knew I was, because I'm from Texas, they automatically thought I was a Christian conservative, right? But it was, I don't know, it was kind of like, this is the hill I'm supposed to make a stand on and die on. And that's where I felt like I was supposed to be, because I felt that there was some evil happening. And if I never spoke out, I would regret it, you know, and knowing what what God revealed to me, and just that this was where I was supposed to go. So leading up.
Yeah. Walk me through your thought process on how did you find out that anything was going to be going on at the Capitol, and why did you feel like you needed to be there at this time?
Okay. So we going up to January 6th. I mean, I did believe the election was stolen. And that was another thing. I believe that, just, you know, I felt like exposing the media was what I was called to do. And that, you know, so again, we got attacked because of that. If you even thought that there was potential misconduct in the election, you were looked at like a crazy person. Right. And so, you know, getting up closer to January 6th, I heard about the Stop the Steal rally. It was actually called something else. And they, I think, have renamed it that to make it. But one of my best friends was like, Coffee, would you want to go out there? And I was like, you know what? I think I'd like to document it. I'm a documentarian too. I've done a couple of documentaries, and we heard it was going to be a historic day. I mean, there was upwards, they say, of 1 million to 2 million people there. It was, you know, it was a wild day, but so he asked me to go, and I was like, you know what, let's do it. And
so, to set the record straight, you're going to document this as a storyteller,
as a filmmaker.
Yeah. You're going to be an outsider. You did not go as someone who was in these chat rooms.
No, I knew nothing
working
about
together to, you know, whatever they claimed that Parler was doing was being the place that these insurrectionists were meeting and planning and coordinating all of this stuff. That was not what you were a part of.
Yeah. But what's funny is, so Alex Stein, who now has a show on Blaze, I was calling in to he had a show called Conspiracy Castle before he got on Blaze.
Remember that, yeah.
And I would call in, not as these different characters, like comedic characters, and talk about conspiratorial stuff, but I didn't want it to be my name, you know, under as Luke Coffee. So I did these different voices. And then, so he asked me to go and be like the man on the ground, boots on the ground, also to be a reporter there that day for him. So I was like, I literally was dressed as my Cubicle Cowboy character, this over the top, far right, you know, Texan like character, which was perfect because he looks like he looks like an insurrectionist, domestic terrorist. And anyway, so I went out there, and I had like multiple costumes. I was changing it. I mean, this is all in my trial. My trial had to be one of the most bizarre trials that DC's ever seen, because we showed different clips of, you know, this is my intent. There was they used one of my satire accounts, said like, headed to the dirty ass swamp to save America. And they used that in my trial to claim that I had a pre-planned, I had pre-planned to go and insurrect the Capitol. And I said, that's a satirical account. And then we showed like some commercials where I've played this Cubicle Cowboy character, like over the top Texas guy. And so it was laughable, but this is the kind of stuff they were using. And we'll get into invasion of our privacy,
sure,
when we get into that. But so I went out there and was dressed, I actually had, I had a duck hunting coat on, and
how many characters were you in the course of how many days?
There was like 3 or 4, I had like 5 wigs, and it was 3 or 4 characters that I was live streaming on the way out there. And we said, it's funny now because I'm past it all, but we said we were in this militia, and I was playing different characters with my buddy Brady as we're talking to Stein, like joking that we're in this like militia, not knowing.
Like looking back, would you have done it differently?
Maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's how innocent it was because we didn't know what was about to go down. So we drove out there. I got there, and we put, like, as a joke, big MAGA flags on his truck, and like it was just, and drove into DC. So the next morning,
and this was what, the day before January? It was January 5th.
January 5th. We went to like we stayed in Nashville on the way down, and arrived like late on January 5th. And so got up January 6th, and I had multiple cameras and was interviewing. I have 4.5 hours of footage from the Ellipse, which I was mainly there, and I was interviewing just countless people. And
what were you mostly finding when you're talking to these people?
What I've described what it was, and you don't see the footage of, you see the worst of the worst, the Capitol. It was like a 4th of July music festival meets a revival. That's what it felt like. It was the American spirit, and like people were praying everywhere and evangelizing and just happy and joyful. It wasn't about Trump. He did speak, of course, but there was dancing and, but I talked to a lot of Cuban Americans that, had escaped Cuba, and former Chinese Americans that escaped the CCP. And they were just like the watchmen saying, we're on communism's doorstep. This was a stolen election. And, so I think people, many people I've talked to, countless people, a lot of J6ers, and try to, get their stories out there. And they all feel like they were called there that day. And I know I was. Not knowing that, the Lord didn't warn me about January 6th, but he did say I was going to go through a dark storm.
Didn't tell you what was going to happen.
Yeah. So I spent most of the day, Amy, at the Ellipse interviewing people till like the last people cleared out. My last interview was actually Jeremy Brown, who was just recently released. He was a Green Beret that was a whistleblower. He was actually recruited by the FBI 2 months prior to January 6th to be an asset there that day, and he filmed it. And then they ended up coming after him because he exposed the video 2 months after January 6th and showed that it was an operation. And so they planted grenades on him, and he's been locked up for 4 years until literally 3 or 4 days ago. And but yeah, I interviewed him. He was a 3%er, and he was in full like tactical gear. No, he wasn't armed, of course, but he said, I'm just here to guard the speakers against any anti, protesters, BLM, Antifa. And so, it was, what I saw, I was there till about 2:00, and I didn't know that what had broken out. My dad had tried to call me, but most people's cell phone service was jammed. It didn't work. And I don't know if that was strategically or just because there were so many people there. But he had tried to warn me that what had broken out at the Capitol during this time.
So you're not even at the steps of the Capitol.
No.
While it's going on.
No.
How far away are you from the building?
Well, so I did end up going up there. So I was walking back to my hotel. My battery in my camera, both my cameras had died, and my phone had died, and I was going to go take a nap. And there's supposed to be like some 6:00 dance party in the streets that I was going to go film. I was going to go take a nap. I was pretty tired, and so I was going back to my hotel, walking down Pennsylvania, and still about a half mile from the Capitol. And there were these 3 young guys, and again, a half a mile from the Capitol, running towards me. And they had brand new MAGA hats, and they said, there's people dying inside the Capitol. We need patriots up there. And I had been warned by a buddy who's former naval intelligence officer that said, Coffee, just be aware that this could be a perfect opportunity for like a false flag operation. And a false flag operation is basically our own government through the CIA has done these operations, including Ukraine in 2014, where they basically start a riot or an incident and blame it on the opposition party. And to me, that's what January 6th was. And I even believe it, so much more 4 years later and after what I've endured and 1,600 of us, because it was the smoke and fire for a stolen election. Now we don't talk about the stolen election. We went there that day to make our voices heard, to make our presence known while they were, that was the day they were certifying the election. We wanted them to go back to the states and look at the evidence. And because, immediately when they were, when they were about to look at the potential evidence, they said, there's been a break in. And, that's when it all went away and this insurrection happened. And I did notice, okay, so when those three guys ran up to me, I immediately thought bullshit. I didn't believe it. And I felt like the Holy Spirit said, go up there and pray and de-escalate. That it was already, so I went up there with the scales off my eyes looking for, aspects of a false flag or a setup and a trapment, which is what it was. And as I went up there,
meaning the stairs.
Well, I went up, so I was still half a mile. I walked up. There were, they believe there were 60 to 70,000 people at that time. I got up there at 3:45, 67,000. You never see the backside. You just see the front side of the Capitol. Most people didn't even know what was going on. And they have a speaker system that they could have used all day to tell people to leave. They didn't use it. But as I got up there, there was actually, in the median age that day I saw were a boomer age, some of which were complaining about, I don't know if I want to walk all the way to the Capitol from the Ellipse. It's about a 2-mile walk. And so as I got closer, people are literally singing Amazing Grace, and projectiles are being shot into this peaceful crowd of people literally praising Jesus, singing Amazing Grace. Then they went in the Star Spangled Banner. And people are confused and there's chaos. Like, why are you firing at us? We backed the blue, And so as I got closer, there was the same line. There's people dying. And it was like straight, out of Backstage West. Like these are hired actors to say, so tell everybody there's people dying inside. And there was a guy named Scaffolding, they called Scaffolding Commander, who had a bullhorn saying, grab your weapons and move up. This guy's never been charged. And he was on a bullhorn telling people to grab their weapons. There wasn't one true weapon or gun found that day, but there was all these random weird things, including a crutch that's part of my story that was up around the Capitol. So there were people yelling, we need people to come up there, and there's people dying inside. So there was also a guy, and I've told this story multiple times, that had over the top just blood running down his face, and he's just, I've done enough castings in my life. Like I've probably done 300 castings, been as a director, and I know crappy actors, and it was, they stood out like a sore thumb. And this guy, as I got closer, I was like, that is stage blood. And they used this in false flags. And I'm not saying there wasn't real blood that day, because there was, but as I got closer, it was stage blood. I was like, people, they're trying to instigate this and escalate it, And so there were guys dressed in Antifa that were breaking the windows, and everybody was yelling Antifa, Antifa. Most people, Amy, were just standing around, just observing, and a lot of people didn't even see the violence that was going on. I didn't even know people had gone inside and I never went inside. But as
you never made it inside?
No, I never went inside. Never had intent to go inside. So what happened? And I knew I didn't want to be involved. But when they gassed on the West Terrace tunnel, which they had constructed for the inauguration coming up on the 20th, they had scaffolding towers and a stage where they do the inauguration. So most people thought that was part of, we knew Alex Jones was speaking and Franklin Graham, and people were supposed to be speaking. And we thought it was just a progressive rally. I'd been out to a Christian rally with my dad in November called The Return, where we went around and prayed at different, at the Capitol, at different monuments, prayed over DC. It was like a progressive prayer walk. So most people just thought that's, we didn't know we were trespassing. Every person that has been charged was charged with trespassing. I saw no.
At what point are you trespassing? Stepping on the lawn, getting on the stairs. Has anyone ever explained that to anybody? Like, at what point are you technically trespassing?
At some point at 1:30, they had a barrier that they have evidence that, and video evidence that police moved and other people and suspicious, people moved. And so there was no dispersal. There was no cops that told people to leave. But you were trespassing at that point if you were on the grounds. There were people. I'm living in Fredericksburg now. There's 4 women that were charged this summer that were literally praying like 200. It was like 150 yards away from the Capitol on the lawn, and they were charged. So 4 years later.
How come there was 1,600 people ended up getting charged? But there were 70,000 people out there. What was going on with all the other people?
Yeah, it's a theory that I think they went after a lot of people that couldn't fight back with, this is because a lot of people couldn't afford that they charged, couldn't find, had to get a public defender. Most of the time, public defenders are very liberal and they talked them into taking plea deals. And if you don't have money to fight, this has been a very expensive fight for me, like everyone else. my first attorney paid him $50,000 for 3 weeks. He wanted another $400,000 just to go forward. So it's, we're not sure why some people were charged and why others not. So what
about you specifically? Like you were doing, at what point, did you walk away in handcuffs? Did they handcuff you?
No. So what happened was they gassed the West Terrace tunnel. For 3 hours, they let people walk through this long, I think it's 100-foot tunnel that actually leads into the Capitol. But a lot of people just thought it went up to the next tier. And, a lot of us, Lindsey Graham ended up being one of my witnesses that testified in my trial, and because she helped me after my incident. But
Patriot Barbie, not the senator.
No, yeah, Patriot Barbie, Lindsey Graham, Patriot Barbie. So what happened was they gassed this tunnel that they allowed people in. Inside this tunnel, also a lady named Victoria White was beat 38 times in the head and upper body, and she was charged with assault. So for blocking a cop, that it was a captain, I believe, of the DC Metro Police that was beating her. And there was a rage and an evil that was going on, because it was, up until that day, it was very patriotic and peaceful. And you enter chaos, confusion, and violence, and there were a lot of good men like myself that were trying to de-escalate. And
what were you doing specifically to try to de-escalate?
So what happened was they gassed the tunnel and pushed. There were people pushing from behind. So they call these provocateurs. There were suspicious actors that were trying to instigate and make, otherwise what would have been more of a peaceful incident into a more violent one, or just, causing the chaos and confusion. But so these people were walking in, they let them walk in, and then they brought reinforcements, were pushing all these people out of the tunnel, eventually where the cops pushed them down and people stumbled. There were women and men that were just naively walked in this tunnel, and then they couldn't move. They were like, sardines in a can, but then they get pushed down, and it's 3 or 4 bodies. And that's right when I got up there, when I saw this gassing, and all these cops have masks on. This is a military grade chemicals gas that they released in an enclosed environment, which you're not supposed to do. So people can't breathe. There's chaos, and are tumbling down the stairs, and 3 or 4 on top of each other. And that's where I hear women and men screaming, I can't breathe. I'm dying. So that's where I inserted myself. And I was trying to help multiple. I was going after the women first. And, if there's a fire, I'm going to run towards it. I don't care if it's a man, even. I'm going to, especially if it's a child or a woman, I'm going to run towards it. And so that's what I was attempting to do. And I couldn't do anything. So literally, I'm on video saying, stop and pray. I say it 12 times. And that became my still photo, which was on the FBI most wanted list, was me saying, stop and pray, like this. So, and
you're holding up the crutches at this point?
Not the crutch yet. So then I was trying to hope. So there was a woman that was killed that day that is finally, Trump has acknowledged there was another woman killed that day. Her name is Roseanne Boylan. And it de-escalated for a second. And there were 3 of us men that were talking like, we need to stop it from escalating again. Right on this, because it was the most violent right here in this West Terrace. That's where you see the highlights of the worst. So these two other guys were like, my family's here, or I'm worried about my business. It was like, and I felt called to go stand up there. And there was a woman that I knew was still up there, not knowing it was Roseanne and not knowing exactly where she is. So I said, I'll go up there. And so I walked as peacefully as I could. And I said, I went up there and I was like, there's people still down that need help, and I said, a family divided will not stand. And then they immediately sprayed me in the face multiple times. And then an officer named DC Metro, Officer Lila Morris, beat me in the head and the torso, in between beating an unconscious Roseanne Boylan, who literally was touching my boot. She laid right next to me. And so then I look down, I'm blinded, and I see a crutch had been thrown 1 second before I walked up there. And so I put it over my head, and like I was being sprayed. So I just said, in the name of Jesus, Lord, please stop this. I was like, stop. There's people that need help. And it's misleading. It looks like I'm right up against the police line. I was 6 feet away from them, and they kept hitting me. And so I said it to the crowd, stop, and then they beat me in the back of the head. And I leaned into the line and for like 3 seconds. And anyway, so I was charged after that with assault with a deadly weapon. But it was a self-defense response from I was trying to block them from hitting me. And so that moment I was up there for 60 or 45 seconds. Then I was pushed down the stairs, and then Lindsay came and brought me water and green juice. And she testified that my demeanor, I was telling people we need to leave. They're trying to escalate, and got on a bullhorn, was telling people to leave. But that moment, changed my life. It was a wild thing. But so immediately, we made it back to the hotel that night, and it was worse than 9/11, worse than Pearl Harbor, the worst attack on America since the Civil War. And I was going again now, speaking on Stein's show, went on this other podcast. I was like, this is the biggest lie, and so I think I definitely put a bigger X on me.
I was going to ask you that. Do you feel like you somehow got yourself flagged in all of this?
Yeah. I mean, I think they kept showing me with the crutch, putting it above my head. I mean, that's where the irony was that DC Metro Officer Lila Morris, I was actually convicted of assaulting her. And I was charged, for 3.5 years. I knew I never touched her, and she was pulled off the line because she was just enraged. And Roseanne Boylan died. They said first she died. I mean, they smeared this woman, said she died of a drug overdose. She had Adderall in her system, and they made her a crazy QAnon, like she deserved that. I mean, they now believe that it was due to the beating, of this officer that she perished. So, or it's questionable. So they elevated this cop as one of the 4 heroes of January 6th. She waved at the Super Bowl and was celebrated as one of the heroes. I mean, and let's be honest, if we had just dealt with the summer of love for 4 months, where, because of George Floyd, and this was an African-American officer beating an unconscious, white woman. I mean, it's just, and it was hidden. It was covered up. And they actually said in the New York Times that Luke Coffey prevented the cops from rendering aid. For 8 minutes before I walked up there, there were men that were saying, there's a woman down that needs your help. And the cops were ignoring the pleas. And when I pushed against the line, that's when they were able to grab Roseanne and start doing chest compressions on it. And there's a guy named Sheriff Ronald Maccabee who was right next to me, and he was up there, knew that Roseanne was down, and they were beating him. And he's a deputy sheriff. He was in a sheriff outfit and everything, and he's been locked up. He was locked up for 4 years until recently. There's all the men around Roseanne Boylan I'm in the 1% that haven't spent majority of the last 4 years in prison. And I think because they were witnesses of what they saw.
So tell me what happened. So at what point are you able to leave the scene on your own?
Yeah.
And then you get a phone call that says, wait, you're needed back in DC. This is what's happening. How did that whole process take place?
Okay. So I'm we ended up, we were going to stay another day, or we were going to go back to Nashville and spend a day and then go to Atlanta and go hunting with a buddy. And we just went back to, because of what went down and what they were saying in the media, like we went back to Dallas, drove right back the next day. And, you know, I definitely, I think because I was speaking out in 3 days, my Facebook was completely nuked. I was going live on Facebook and saying, this is not what the media is telling you. I have friends one of the gentlemen I was talking to you about called me a traitor publicly with his 30,000 followers. Unfollow this guy. He's a traitor to our country. You know, everybody, you know, the fact that if you were there that day, I mean, you treated like you were the worst.
Yeah.
If you were there just using your First Amendment right, we're allowed to gather and vocalize and petition the government when we think, especially when we think something is not kosher.
Right.
So
did it ever cross your mind though that what was about to happen to you would happen to you?
I think when I saw I saw the media storm that was building around, this is the worst day, and how they're switching it now. Like, now we're not talking about any stolen election. We're talking all about January 6th, which ended up happening. The Democrats talked about it constantly for 4 years, using it against Trump, demonizing half of the country. That if you're patriotic, God-fearing, you're a Christian nationalist, you're a MAGA, cult member. And so, yeah, I think I saw it coming, and I wanted to get my voice out there before. I didn't know it was coming at the level it was, but I mean, just the attacks again, were just, the fact that I was there, and then people saw me holding up the crutch. Supposedly a Baylor FBI agent recognized me. And this is what's clear to all of us, that this was like a public tar and feathering in the public square. I mean, they know, they put our names, they put our pictures on billboards across Texas and across America. Like, do you know this person? Like, I mean, they have facial recognition technology on Facebook. They knew who we are. They wanted to publicly shame us and scare anybody that stands up against the government and questions.
This is going to happen to you too.
Yeah, this will happen to you. And most people did get scared. So yeah, within 3 or 4 days, my Facebook was nuked. I was going live, and yes, I was getting completely attacked and saying, y'all got to wake up. This is a complete lie. Nobody's asking the witnesses that were there what happened. It's all these talking puppets in the media that's telling you what the narrative, telling you that it's worse than 9/11. How disrespectful is it, Amy, to say that it is worse than 9/11 or Pearl Harbor for the families that lost people in those events? I mean, these are just dog whistle, terms that they're using, and we're all, I was called I'm a white supremacist. I'm a racist, because I'm a terrorist. I'm a domestic terrorist. All these terms, we were all treated because of the Patriot Act. We had no rights. That was supposedly, because after 9/11, that was supposed to make us more safe, but then not when it's used against the American people. And I'm telling you, this was an entrapment by our own government, like never before. Never's been done. They used this to, again, smoke and fire for a stolen election. That's what it was. I mean, you can't convince me otherwise. And they used 16 of us in this political theater as pawns for this narrative that this was a complete lie. So yeah, I came back. I'm on I'm on the FBI's most wanted list for assaulting an officer. I've never been arrested in my life. I've been, my grandfather's a judge. Ironically, my other grandfather was chairman of the DNC under the Carter administration. My grandmother's friends with the Clintons and all that. So I became for my left side of my family, my liberal side, they were ashamed that I shared their name. Texas Monthly did this huge hit piece on me and said I was Texas royalty, which is a joke. I'm not any royalty at all, but that, I've shamed the whole family, and that, I went down. They brought up my past accident we can talk about later, but that's when it all went down, when I lost my fiance years ago in a Hollywood accident. That's when everything turned. and then he bought into COVID, and he thinks that child trafficking is real, and
wow,
that Fauci's a liar, and all this stuff. That is now
a lot of it's turned out to be true.
Right?
Yeah,
exactly. But so everything I had said previously, and and people that had already distanced themselves from me, like, believed that I lost it and felt called to, or felt led to go attack the Capitol and be an insurrectionist, which was not true at all. My parents were that was a very hard period because they couldn't even hear the truth. I said, Mom and Dad, I was trying to go, and there were women that were crying out. I have no regret that, and I know the Lord told me to go up there and try to de-escalate and stand in the gap. But it was a very lonely time. I had two buddies that stood by me. So the FBI contacted me. Well, I contacted them after I found out I was on. I mean, they're putting. Yeah.
Sorry. How many FBI most wanted people actually contact them?
Yeah, exactly.
Say, hey, by the way,
yeah, I was
I'm
like,
on that
what is
list.
the deal? And I told them my story. That's the whole thing. My favorite quote that I was going to say at some point is, truth is like a lion. You don't have to defend it. You let it loose and it'll defend itself. So my story has never changed. And that's where I've done probably over 70 interviews, and I believe God has had me on the outside, longer than most. So I can speak up for the other guys that have been locked up. This is a fraternity that none of us called to be, wanted to be in, but we're all, for whatever reason, God has put us in this group of 1,600. And a lot of guys people were scared to speak out, that because of they'll come after you. That's what they want to do, is ruin your life. They want to ruin your reputation where you can't ever work again. I mean, you're now labeled as this terrorist. And if Trump hadn't come in, I mean, this would have gone a whole different direction.
So were you ever actually formally charged with, I mean, did you stand before a judge? Did you get a trial?
So my buddy, when all this was going down initially, I went to Comfort, Texas, down by Fredericksburg, and my buddy was just like, come get away. And that's what Texas Monthly said. I was hiding out from the FBI. I have a defamation suit against them right now because they claim I was hiding out. Meanwhile, I'm talking to the FBI, and every day, I talked to them about 14, 15 times. I was not a suspect
Wait, what?
Yeah, I wasn't a suspect. I was like, well, get my
How are you on the FBI? Photo. Yeah, how are you on the FBI's most wanted list?
Yeah,
not as a suspect.
Yeah, so that's what I said. Well, take my ass off the off the posters then. I mean, and these were all circulating, and think about So my Facebook was nuked, but on Instagram I'm still like, turn yourself in, traitor. And I mean, it was the most crazy experience where my own parents at this point, they came quickly around, like the Lord said, but I couldn't even speak to them because they were like, go turn yourself into the FBI. And I said, I've talked to them. I'm not a suspect. And so 3 weeks go by, and then the same agent, Michael Hillman, calls me and said, Mr. Coffey, it's not looking good now. We have new evidence. You might be charged, and we're going to need you to turn yourself in. Or we're going to need to talk to you. And I said, well, you can talk to my lawyer. I didn't have a lawyer yet, so I found one quickly, which was hard to find. It's been difficult to find somebody to represent us. I mean, but if we're a pedophile or rapist, but if you're Jay Sixer, we don't want to touch you. So I actually came to Dallas, was able to turn myself in. They were checking out my place. They were ready to bust in, like most people. They came with SWAT teams and totally.
Did they ever bring forward what charges you were being charged with? What were you a suspect in?
Well, I mean, it said I was on the FBI most wanted, said assault of a police officer. So they had an 8-hour hearing, pretrial hearing initially. It was like a full trial where I had 7 character witnesses. It was to decide if I'm a threat to society or a flight risk. And the Dallas judge said he's not a flight risk, so they were going to put me on home detention or on an ankle monitor.
So you got to do this in Dallas. You didn't have to go back to DC?
So that was the initial one. So then I went to prison for 50 days because the Dallas prosecutor wanted to go up to the DC court and have them rule on it. So I had to wait 50 days. Because of the Patriot Act, I was considered a terrorist. So I was belly chained, and they took me into prison in Mejia, Groesbeck County, or Texas. in a federal holding facility with completely convicted felons that were waiting for their sentencing because of COVID. It was complete lockdown and nobody could get sentenced. So I was locked up there.
Is that normal to have to wait in prison for your sentencing?
So it wasn't even sentencing because I haven't even gone to trial.
Oh, yeah,
I haven't even been charged.
Right, yeah.
I haven't even been charged yet. So yeah, that's not like the fact that I hadn't been indicted and I'm in prison without a record is not normal.
But that was following. So, but your case was specifically following under what happened because of the Patriot Act.
Because yeah, I'm a terrorist. I'm a potential terrorist. Okay. And that's how we've been treated this whole 4 years. I mean, when we stopped it, I've been arrested. I've been handcuffed for when I was changing a tire because of the Patriot Act. It comes up as I'm a potential terrorist. And so they treat me like that.
Does that ever get wiped off of your record?
Yeah, so that did. So yeah, just to finish, I did. They go up for 50 days. I wait. They go to a very liberal judge in D.C. and they say Mr. Coffey was defending others and defending himself, so we're going to let him off and put him on home detention. I was on home detention for 18 months. I moved to my lake house, my family lake house, lived in our guest cabin on an ankle monitor. I could only leave during certain hours of the day. And so I dealt with that for 18 months. And my trial was last a year ago. And I was never going to take a plea. They tried to scare everyone into plea deals. They initially said I could get 25 years, and it came down to 5 years. They offered a plea deal of 5 years if I plead to assault with a deadly weapon. And then they came down to 3, and then they said 6 to 3 months, 6 months to 3 years. And I was just never going to take a plea because, I mean, I don't want to bear false witness. I know what I did.
So you wanted to take your chances in front of a jury.
In a DC courtroom, it was 100% conviction rate with juries for DC for January 6 cases, 99% with a bench trial, which means a judge decides. He's your judge and jury.
Yeah, which at that point, how do you even get a non-biased jury? Which you're supposed to be able to get trial. What is it? Our 16th Amendment? I can't remember which.
Yeah, we should have had. I mean, constitutionally, we should have had a change of venue. All of our trials should have been moved out of D.C. We're 74%. We did a poll through a conglomerate group of this J6 nonprofit that said 74% of people in D.C. believed if you just attended the Stop the Steal rally that you were a terrorist. Like that's our peer of our jury of our peers. So I mean, it was completely. I knew it was a losing deal, but I would rather go sit in a cage. And I knew I was looking at least 7 or 8 years, and I'd rather stand up for truth than to bend a knee to this lie, And I couldn't say that. If I had a family, I know a lot of people that. I understood why they took pleas, but they used fear and intimidation to scare people in. We're going to give you 20 years, And so how it worked out, Amy, was I went to trial. It was a very bizarre case. I gave my whole testimony. I mean, there's Antifa couple in the front that you could just feel the evil. They go to every trial and they're just look at you as like you're the worst, enemy of the state. And I told my whole trial. I told my whole backstory during the trial and spoke directly to the judge. My judge let it be known. He tried to intimidate Lindsey Graham, Patriot Barbie, and said that she could be charged. I didn't want her to end up coming because he was making it so clear that she could be charged if she testified because she was up there on the West Terrorist and they could charge her with the 4 misdemeanors everybody has. Yeah. And she's got kids and business and she felt called by God to testify and stand. And what's funny is there was this little butchy prosecutor that was mocking her for starting her own business out of COVID and building what she has. And she was just, and she's a pretty girl. And the judge was like, it came across very pathetic, but she just stood her ground and was very proud of what God had done through her circumstance. And yeah, so the whole trial was 5 days and it was intense. And, what the saving grace, the judge, no one has had a trial gone like this. He waited 350 days to render a verdict. Okay. So I waited for almost a full year without a verdict. Most people waited for 45 to 60 days, if that. some people got a verdict right then, you know.
Wait, and so what year was this?
So this was 2023. No, it was it was January 2024. So I got it. I didn't get it till it was the end of January 2024. And then I just got convicted on 7 of 8 charges. They dropped 2 of my charges, initially 10. I had 10 charges. Initially I had 5 charges. But this was all when I spent my prison time, I hadn't even been indicted because of the Patriot Act. I wasn't even fully charged and it was a very dark time, but I felt God's presence. I mean, it was just like I read all Paul's letters and Job. I mean, it was, and again, my dad does prison ministry, and the only time I had ever been in prison was sharing the gospel with my dad. So it's a little different when you can't leave at the end of the day. And you only get out of your cell 6 hours and 50 days. So, I mean, we ate in there, shower, use the bathroom, and we couldn't go outside.
Were you in there with other January?
No, I was the only J6er out of 2,500 at this prison. But this was God's saving grace. I was on TMZ the night I got checked in, and these brothers saw me like getting checked in, and they were like, "Luke Coffey, we saw you on TMZ, man." And so they called me Hollywood and the Insurrectionist, and that was like my little hedge of protection because I didn't have to. A lot of people had to join gangs and just to survive in there. It's dark, you know, but everybody left me alone and thought I was a joke. You were the guy with the crutch. Why are you in here? You know? So going back to it, December 13th of just this past December, I was convicted of 7 to 8 charges, including assault with a deadly weapon on Lila Morris, who on the stand said 3 times, "I never touched her." And so they ended up using, and we were like, wondering like maybe he's gonna rule in my favor, but it's just the odds are totally against you. But what we ended up using, that my case became an example, and I wrote an open letter to Trump that the Gateway Pundit published, and we actually got to Don Jr. that said, you know, I wrote a letter that I'm an example of many, but mine's very cut and dry, that this is fruit from a poisonous tree. These convictions are so political that I literally was convicted of assaulting an officer that video evidence show she was 10 feet back. How did I assault her? And she said, "I never touched her." Yet I was convicted of that and looking at 7 or 8 years in prison. So we did get it to him. And so I believe that's the reason why God allowed that too. And
do you believe they went case by case before making the pardon, or did they just give a blank? They just gave a blanket
pardon. I think there were 7 to 8 that didn't have the full pardon, but majority of, it's like 1,588 got the full blanket pardon. And that's just like, you know, it is the root of a poisonous tree, because it was so biased. There was no chance to winning in DC. I mean, if you have 100% conviction rate, how is that fair?
Yeah.
You know, so, but because of my situation, the case was still open, and I was going to be sentenced April 24th. So my case was still considered open. Any open case was just completely dropped. So my case just completely went away and my charges were dropped. I didn't even need the pardon. So that was like pretty incredible. And
well, so I mean, like, has the court of public opinion really messed up anything moving forward? Or, I mean, talk about that.
Well, I mean, it's just funny because we went from, you know, pariahs to celebrated patriots. I mean, I've said this multiple times. We've been we're modern day lepers. Nobody wanted to touch us at first. Even conservatives were just like, ooh, you know, they didn't know, because of, even Fox was saying it was the worst day, you know, since the Civil War. I mean, so when you have that and you don't get the full story, you know, and that's where Satan uses partial stories. He just takes a little piece and he'll take a piece of truth and sell that, and it's still a lie. It's still poison, right? Yeah. So I think that's been hard, is just, you know, it's fine. People, as, you know, the truth was more and more uncovered, I think people started to wake up. But we've also seen January 6th. I mean, we just had on our show, this pastor, Leon Benjamin, he believed that January 6th, that was a pivotal moment in waking up people, and just that how much of a deception that day was and how important that was to happen to begin this awakening to, you know, how corrupt our government is. I mean, if our own government will do that to the American people, I mean, that's a scary thing. You know, and once that quote of, if you fear the, you know, you fear the government, you know, that they have control over you. And that's where that I think we 1 million plus of us were there to stand up against the government that day, and they used us and twisted the story. And now God is revealing. I think we're in a season, Luke 8:17, everything that's hidden is being revealed, and the revelations are happening, you know, with Doge and everything, you know, that we're seeing. We've known there's corruption, but we haven't known the depth of it. And I'm glad that there's other men that get to tell, and women that get to tell their stories. I mean, there's so many January 6thers that their lives have been ruined. There's been upwards of 9 suicides because of what the media has done. I mean, they've made us complete pariahs, like the untouchables. And but that's, again, if we have a power in our voice, and that's, you know, even though I was, you know, on home detention, I was speaking out, and other people have been speaking out from prison. I mean, it's just, again, finally, the truth finally does win in the end. It's not in our timing.
Yep. Yeah. So tell me now, I mean, and I'm so appreciative that you came on. You're the first one that we've actually had come on and share their story about January 6th. This is the perfect platform to do that because we're not going to take your video off of our platform, you know? And, but what does your mission look like now moving forward? What's next for Loot Coffee?
Well, I mean, that's what was wild, Amy, is I was praying for God to, like, you know, to give me another opportunity, like, to change my path in the media world. And he, you know, be careful what you pray for.
Right.
But I mean, God has used this to kind of rapidly change my path and my mission. And again, I hated politics because it's divided my family so much, because I have one side that's very conservative, one that's very liberal, and we can't talk about it. You know, we can't talk about politics, and it's divided us. And I love both sides very much. But I think, you know, with, you know, and I was deplatformed. I was shadow banned on Instagram for a long time. I can't even get back on Facebook. There's apps that I can't get on because I'm considered a terrorist. That still hasn't been rectified. But I really do feel called to continue to speak up in whatever platform this has given me. I want to, share absolute truth. And I believe God is the author of truth, and Satan is, again, the author of deception and partial truths. So speak against that, but also just I love this country and what it stands for, and just from a citizen level. And I think, you know, people have asked me, would I run for office? I would rather be more impactful in the media, like where you are, and use our voice, because I believe media has, as we've seen, can have such an impact. And what, you know, the enemy wants to use for evil, God can use for good, especially if he has people with the Holy Spirit and the right, you know, righteousness behind it. And I think we're seeing, you know, we're living in the wild, wild west. We're in a very cool place as far as independent media. People are tired. You know, the mainstream media is a dying dinosaur. It's on its way out. People are tired of
this is how people are getting their message out. Doing this right now, having the conversations, putting it on places where, you know, originally Parler was the only free speech platform. And when you talk about another entire silencing 20 million people overnight. I mean, that is what happened to Parler. They blamed it all on January 6th as well. But because of that, it showed there's a market for this. People want this. And that, you know, that's when Elon bought X. That's when Rumble and Truth and Getter, all these other platforms popped up. But I mean, who would have ever thought that we needed that? And like, you need specifically dedicated platforms to being able to share truth. And get it out there. But here we are. And it is an exciting time because you don't have to rely on the mainstream media. You don't have to rely on that. And you can go and you can pick the information. You can listen to what you want to listen to and decide for yourself if it lines up with truth or not.
Right. And it's not, I mean, this is an unscripted platform. We're not reading from a teleprompter, and we're just letting it flow. But the reality is I met Laura Logan. she was doing a documentary around my story. And, I really do want Roseanne Boylan's death is going to come to light. There's a new film coming out that Ben Swan and his team are doing that I'm involved in, that's coming out, I think, in March, that it's supposed to be on, ironically, going to be on Netflix or Amazon, that's going to expose this cover up and death of Roseanne Boylan. Because that in general, that was, Laura believed it's such a pivotal thing that they would cover up a woman's death and demonize her. And, that kind of shows what January 6th was. It was just a big charade and a really evil deception. But so I met her during, she did a documentary around my story, and at the end we had a 4 or 5 hour conversation and shot over a couple days. And she was like, "Luke Coffey, I'd love you to produce for me one day." And so fast forward, right, like 2 days after I happened to be in the Hell Country when I got my charges dropped, and she said, "Luke, I heard you're in the neighborhood. Come talk to me." And so I went to her place. She lives in Fredericksburg, and she had been working with our other producing partner on developing this concept in the studio in Fredericksburg. And she said, "Luke, I'd love you come on as co-host and producer and partner on this new media venture." And she's been canceled, so we have that in common. Yeah. She was initially, she exposed Benghazi. That's when she first, when Hillary was trying to become the new queen of America, and they didn't want that story out there. And then she called Fauci on her Fox Nation show, a modern day Joseph Mingle, and they wanted her to walk that back. And she said, "No, this is what I believe." And so she lost her contract. And so we've got a new show called Going Rogue with Laura Logan. And we've just launched our first couple episodes, and we're really pumped about it. And we don't have, like you, we're going to hopefully be on Parler soon, but she's a decorated journalist that was part of the mainstream machine. Yeah. She won the Emmys and was literally celebrated until she stood up against the machine. And so they try to cancel her. And the woman's a badass, like you are.
Well, thank you.
You are. And so she and I are going to have, I'm going to have my own little segment, but we're also be covering, news, but also having very in-depth, documentary style, like interviews with, a lot of great B-roll. And it's a new venture. We're bootstrapping it. So we need the audience to come and check us out.
Well, that's a perfect segue. Tell everybody where they can go and find you.
So you can go check us out. Going Rogue with Laura Logan on Rumble, X, Parler to come, and YouTube. But like you already mentioned, YouTube is already shadow banning.
Good luck on YouTube.
They're already shadow banning. You have to search my name and Laura's, I think, to even find our episodes. So we're across all platforms, and it's going to be bi-weekly episodes, maybe 3 a week eventually. So we're real excited about it.
Excellent. Well, Luke, thank you for your time.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing your story. And most importantly, just thank you for the work that you're doing, and also giving other people a platform and a voice and a chance to share their stories.
Well, we want you to come on and talk about,
done.
All of you've done for the Second Amendment.
Well, thank you.
And the amazing business you've built. And
done. We'll show swap.
We'll do it. We'll show swap it. Let's do it.
All right, Luke. Thanks so much, guys, and we'll see you again next time.